Yo, guys, what's going on? Happy Monday. Welcome back to another Beat the Odds episode. How y'all doing today?
Doing good.
Good, man. Good, man. Literally just got back today from New York, man. It was a good time out there. Shout out Jamie. She just wrapped up her first year of business school. Yeah, and then we launched Philly on Friday, man. And so, yeah, another city, launched and, running, man. So, yeah, things are going good, man. How about y'all?
I just got back from a busy travel week as well last week, man. I was in Arizona and Tucson. Man, it's so crazy. It's literally like being in the desert. Like there was no grass anywhere. There was no green. Everything was like the same. It was just a shade of brown. Everything was a variation of brown or gray. So it was cool to be there for a couple of days. And I'm like, man, I cannot live here. I need to see green. I miss the trees and the grass. But I was out there for some client work, and then shot down to Austin as well. So I've been just on the go, man. So I just got back home this week, Sunday. So yeah, it just feels good to be back home and sleeping in my own bed.
Yeah, that's one of the best parts after traveling is coming back home and just getting right back into your own routine. Yeah, I guess for me, like I've been all right. I'm preparing to travel for next week. I'll be in LA for a week for work, so I pretty much got that on my mind. You know how it is before a flight, but I guess because I brought up the flight, I feel like maybe that's like the first topic we should start off with. It is so I don't remember, but did we fly American or Spirit to San Francisco that first time? Not the first time we ever visited, but like when we moved to California in 2016. Was it Spirit?
I'm pretty sure it was Spirit because Spirit always
Yeah,
had
best price.
the best price for the West Coast to Michigan, Detroit flights like that. I don't know what it is about that route. They just got that route on lock, but they
Yeah,
always had the best prices. So yeah, it was
yeah,
most definitely Spirit. I used to take that all the time back and forth
yeah,
for the
yeah,
holidays or just whatever.
yeah. I feel like people used to hate on Spirit, man. Like honestly, like for me, Spirit, it wasn't as bad as people said it was. It's like, at least from my perspective, especially if you are in the main cabin. I feel like the main cabin is the same no matter what what airline you're in. Like if you are in Delta, you're in American Airlines. If you're in the main cabin, I felt like if you're talking about Spirit, then and don't say you don't like Spirit because they didn't give you a bag of chips. Like the bag of chips on Delta is every year it's gotten smaller. It's like this big. You have to ask them for 2 bags of chips. You have to ask them.
And the options have reduced. They used to offer you like multiple
Yeah.
things. Like you want this,
Yeah.
that, that. And now it's just like we got this. That's all you got.
It's crazy. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
Somebody referred to Spirit as the Nissan Altima of airlines. Like it's
Jeez.
just reliable, just durable,
Yeah.
That's
reliable, consistent. You know what I'm saying? It's not the most beautiful,
Yeah.
it's not the most flashy brand, but it's just like it's gonna get you from point A to point B. And
Yeah.
everything in between might not be comparable to another airline, but it's gonna get you there. I mean, that's what it was for us, at least at that time, traveling back from the West Coast trying to get back to Michigan. Like we was obviously just trying to get there the cheapest, most reliable way possible. And that's what it
Yeah.
provided. So for some context, they've ceased operations recently. They've been around for like 32 years or something, 34 years, I believe. 14,000 jobs is going to be removed because of this. 14,000 employees. So they must have had some contractors, which is not uncommon. They've had 2 bankruptcies since 2024. This has been a constant cash problem that they've been having. They claim that this is due to, which is possible, that this is due to rising fuel costs because of the war in Iran. And then just probably some of the other, again, debt service payments that they've had to make because they've probably made some investments over the last couple of years. And there was supposed to be, they were intending to do a JetBlue merger back in 2023, but it was blocked by the Department of the DOJ. So they blocked it due to competition. I guess they had some antitrust concerns there. Considering that they blocked that opportunity and we see the outcome, now there's a real question about whether or not that was worth it, right? Because now you have actual jobs that are going to be lost. And now it just leaves the other airlines the opportunity to have more pricing control because now they do, right? Because now they know people have less options. And so now they can tick prices up however they want to. And now you just have less choices, right? And so I don't know. I think there's something, a real conversation there. But most recently, they were trying to negotiate a $500 million government bailout from the Trump administration. But I guess at the last of the hour, those conversations collapsed. And so they're officially ceased operations. So I don't know. My take is I think somebody's going to come in and acquire Spirit, the brand, and probably try to revitalize it. I guess it depends on how bad the debt is, but we'll see. Most people don't know, and I think this is the case with Spirit. They don't own their own airplanes. I think a lot of the times they lease these airplanes. So, you know, these are not assets that they own, but they do have these long-term contracts with the owner of these aircraft. And so I don't know. Somebody could swoop in and acquire it. I think they probably will, but we don't know. Do you think this is the end of Spirit as we know it?
I think it may be, right? Part of the reason why there's like three things that I find interesting about this. The first one is I honestly think the bigger story here might be the debt story, if I'm going to be honest. Because yes, the government did come in and then try to buy 90% of the company for $500 million, but it was actually shot down by Citadel. So you had a hedge fund who essentially was playing the role of a private creditor here for Spirit because they have seniority, came in and said that's just not the deal that made the most sense for us. And I think their rationale was by them liquidating and selling a lot of the different assets that Spirit does have, like the brand, they would be able to make more cash than the 500 million, right? And so I do think that is probably like the larger story here, just because private credit is orders of magnitude larger than venture capital. It's almost a $4 trillion industry. And, you know, we talk a lot about AI on this podcast. It's deeply embedded in AI, right? So don't want to get off that topic. I would say the other thing too is like when I think about the market, you're like spot on, because if we think about Spirit was always the floor, right? Like they were always setting the bottom prices to expand who could participate in the airline market. And I think what is really interesting was, yeah, I was looking at some like historical stats, but it was like the first year Spirit ever was in operations, they had 1.5 million passengers. Last year alone, they had 44 million. So it's crazy to just kind of see that growth. But if you think about the people and the communities of people that were purchasing those low budget tickets, most of them were minority groups. So you just had whatever percentage of 44 million people that are no longer going to be able to travel across this country, not because they're not able to, but because they can't afford to. And I think that's a whole other interesting angle here too. And then, I mean, the other thing too is like, we got to keep it a stack, right? Like there is a whole war on, you know, going on and things aren't like the best. And I think, you know, we should be asking like, why would Trump in this instance want to step in? Yes, he has the president of like stepping in, you know, before, during COVID, things of that nature. But I think, you know, yeah, that's another thing like we could unpack. So like those are three different kind of angles I've just kind of been thinking through. Yeah, just when it comes to like Spirit.
I can see that. I can see that. And I did hear a lot about the affordability aspect, moving pretty much the lowest company in there in the lineup could make traveling unaffordable for Americans. And I understand. I understand that. I think also what I see though from the administration is they're allowing the market to work. So, for example, Dre mentioned how this is an interesting thing because the current players have the ability to understand that, okay, well, customers may not have as much leverage, so there's going to be, we'll see what they do. Maybe they raise the price up a little bit. I saw some screenshots of them doing that. Who knows? I can't verify whether or not it was real or not. So, these days you just never know. But that wouldn't surprise me. But then also too, if these companies do get greedy and they start to do that, that naturally creates a hole. And we know capitalism likes to come in and fill in those holes and compete. So if you have
Can I push back?
Which point? Which point? Yeah, of course. Which point
So,
though?
so yeah. So while I do agree with you that like these companies may be pushing prices up, I don't think it's for the sake of just pushing up prices, right? Like I think like if you think about the supply of air seats. Like that drastically was just cut by 44 million. And so because of basic supply and demand, I think the price is naturally going to rise because you have more people trying to go for like less seats. I don't think it's like, yeah, these companies are naturally just wanting to increase prices for the sake of prices. Like, I don't know if I would put that ill intent
So
behind
I don't know if I necessarily. I kind of see what you're saying. At the same time, I don't see much of a difference. So, for example, like I'm pretty sure that most of those flights were probably booked already before Spirit went down, unless you're suggesting that these flights weren't already booked, and then
it. Yeah, I'm
now.
saying all new ones. Like all new flights after Spirit. Like if anyone, I mean, I even tried to go like purchase a flight recently to freaking Atlanta for this week, bro. And usually I'm able to get a ticket for like 200 or something, bro.
Mhm.
Like on American,
Yeah.
bro. It's $600.
Right.
Like,
Right. Yeah.
so I do think
Yeah.
it's probably already
But
showing up.
also, yeah. Yeah.
But I would say though, but still in that case though, Brylan, in my opinion at least, the airlines are still choosing to raise prices, right? Because they could keep prices at where they were and just simply sell out, right? Like it's nothing wrong with that, right? Like I'm sure you've run into the experience of like wanting to go book a flight with a particular airline on a day and they just unavailable, right? Like that happens all the time, right? So the idea that you have to raise prices because you're getting more demand,
You don't have
while
to. You
while
don't
while
have to.
naturally you're right, like that is naturally like logically sound from an economic standpoint, but they don't have to do that, right? Because at the end of the day, there is only so much supply. That supply is constrained. And so they could simply just sell out everything. And from a business standpoint, that's great for Delta or United or whatever to sell out every flight, right? To sell out every route, every flight, every seat. That's good business, right? But it's also good business to do that and add some more revenue by raising prices where you can, whether that's in seats, whether that's in baggage fees, whether that's in drink menu. Like there's tons of ways the airlines have the
Yeah,
ability to inflate prices because they do see that demand. So I see why I see that point, but I do think it is an intentional business decision to do that and not just purely based on like the market response.
I think your latter point is probably more. I probably agree a lot more with your latter point, specifically like volume and price increase. I think if we think about May getting ready to go into June, I don't think these airlines are about to have any type of trouble selling out. Like, and part of it is you got the World Cup coming, right? And so I think you kind of have more of that coming. Like, I don't know if it would make sense for them, like, out of the good of their heart, to keep flights low.
It doesn't,
For
and
sure.
that's ultimately all I'm getting to was that they're not going to keep prices at a lower rate just for the benefit of Americans or just for the benefit of whoever's flying. They're not going to do that. If they can charge more to fill up the plane, they're going to do it, and they're going to go as far as they can, essentially, until people won't fill up the flights. It Some businesses take it to the extreme. They would rather make 600, 700, $800 a ticket, and then maybe they make more, and maybe there's a few seats. Like they don't have to. I don't know all the legal regulations, but if they have to sell every ticket on the plane, but who knows? But I will say something else though. Regardless, though, when there is a price increase and then there is a affordability issue or affordability crisis or whatever that's created, that creates opportunity. So, and what I personally see now, here's the thing: the opportunity that I see, and there's multiple different angles, but the angle that that I would like to see, the one that I kind of see unfolding, is essentially true innovation happening in the airline industry. Because based on what I see, most of the planes are made by Boeing and these other kind of airliners or that have been creating planes for a while. They're great planes, don't get me wrong, but they aren't as and they're not as energy efficient as, for example, there's this new company called Boom. I don't know if I would say they're extremely new, but they have these supersonic planes that you can get from New York to London in 4 hours. So that's the equivalent of a flight from Detroit to Los Angeles. And you can get across the world extremely fast. Now, when you look at things like that, and they have a bit higher fuel efficiency as well, and it's things like that where if you could get the cost of a plane down, but you could also get the cost of, or you can make them more efficient. But those things that might be a bit far ahead though. Those are just things I would like to see. Because again, I do think that there not being a low level option, if that actually sustained for a while, it would create opportunity.
Yeah. See, I think on the efficiency side, I do agree with you. It'd be nice to see more efficiency. I'm really excited about what Boom is going to do. I've been following them for a while, so I'm excited to see how their product continues to evolve. I think it's needed. I think the problem in the airline industry is that it's a little bit disjointed between like the innovation side and then like the commercial business side, right? Like Spirit is not in the business of manufacturing planes. They're not even in the business of owning planes, right? Like a lot of their fleet is leased similarly to other airlines. And so you just have a bit of a disjointment there. But nevertheless, though, I do still think though there is innovation to probably make the operations of managing and running an airline more efficient so that they're profitable, so that they're a lot more profitable, right? And then I think there's probably more creative financing structures that they need access to that doesn't cripple them as much right now, right? And also too, like, I mean, I think it's fair to acknowledge that the airline industries have had some challenges over the last couple of years. I mean, yes, they've had high demands because people have been wanting to travel, but I mean, COVID and some of these other things have really, really hindered operations because we have to remember during that time, a lot of businesses made a ton of investments and capex expenditures that now are really, really crippling them. But at that time, it was like a non-obvious thing. It was like, well, why wouldn't you? If any executive was in that position and you got overwhelming demand, what do? You try to fill that supply, right? But when you don't look at the forecast 5 or 10 years out, and then you don't look at how that affects the balance sheet, then you run into problems like right now. Right. And again, Spears doesn't, I'm sure their problem doesn't just go back to COVID. I'm sure it started before then, but I'm sure it accelerated then. But nevertheless, I do think there's opportunity on the operation side to make it more efficient, whether it's automation, robots at the gates, you know what I'm saying? Like thinking about like how to cut things where you can or be more efficient. But damn, it seemed like running an airline is a hard business because it seemed like all of them are like one more catastrophic event from like going under. So I don't know.
I think so. And then I think in regards to the operations, one, actually, so you made a couple of points. One, it is very interesting how the airlines are separate from the innovation of the technology. So they often buy the planes and or lease the planes as opposed to being the ones that, you know, build the planes and then, I guess manage the whole business of flying so that's an interesting point there. But then also Spirit should have just rose the prices. Now, I don't know how much, like how badly maybe they felt as though that their situation was such a bad situation that even if they raised the prices on the tickets, it wouldn't change the scenario. But of course, if you have to choose between your company dying or raising the prices, you should probably try to raise the prices as high as you possibly can. Because if you're the lowest, did they even test if people would pay the same price for an American airline? I mean, because if you don't have a choice, at the end of the day, there's only so many tickets. There's only so many tickets. If you raise the price, if you're Spirit and you raise the price to match American Airlines, okay, people might not like that. But if Delta is booked, American Airlines is booked, JetBlue is booked, Southwest is booked, then they wouldn't have a choice anyway. So I guess I'm just wondering, did they why didn't they just match the prices of the competition? I don't
I
maybe they
don't
didn't think it was worth it, or
I don't know this to be true for sure, but based on what Brylan said related to Citadel, and maybe he knows better than I do, I would assume the problem that they ran into is that they had debt service payments that were due that they just couldn't make payments on. And so
yeah,
even if they had to raising
it would be
price
enough.
plus the rising price of operations like jet fuel, like labor, right? Because we also know labor prices have gone up over the last couple of years, not in the way
Yeah,
that most people would want, but they have gone up, right? Just the cost of running a business have gone up. So I think they ran into, and I don't know for sure, but I'm assuming based on what they've done and based on what Brylan said, they probably have run into a cash issue with the debt service payments, and they just weren't able to keep up. The raising of the pricing though that you're talking about probably should have been a decision they made years ago, right? That
for
probably
sure.
was should have been a strategic decision they made. Similarly to what we've seen recently with Southwest Airlines changing a lot of their policies and moving away from kind of being a different airline to kind of becoming more of a standard airline like American United, how they kind of operate.
Yeah,
And I'm assuming they're making those decisions now because they kind of see the future, what that looks like as well. So they probably should have made this decision 5 years ago. But I think in the short term, those debt service payments weren't probably just astronomical. I can only imagine with the rising jet
Yeah,
fuel costs.
Yeah, you're actually like spot on because what really impacted them, and I think is what's showing up today, is when they got that essentially bailed out in bankruptcy in 2004. Yeah, their new debt came in at higher prices. So going back to what you were saying about like increased operating expense, they already were operating at, $2 billion like operating loss. Yeah,
it's just a
they
bad
just,
business. It's just a bad business.
yeah, they didn't
They
have the money.
they're not a good
They didn't have the
business.
money.
Like they have to can't keep bailing them out. Like there's not a good business.
I do want to add something because it's like, I mean, when you're talking about like why doesn't innovation kind of happen in like this market? I think, yeah, Dre brings up a really good point just around like it is one of those fragmented. I would even say like very similar to what we're seeing in semiconductors. Like there's monopolistic behavior, really, right? But I think the thing that I found that was very interesting is I think it all comes back to capital and regulations, right? So just to get some model of a plane, like a new model of a plane certified, it takes 10 years and it costs you $15 billion per plane, right? So that's just to get the model. So the 747 model certified by the US government, right? And then from there, you have to consider that, like, okay, if I'm building an airline, right, that for a model of a plane that has now been certified, the average plane costs $110 million to like just build it, right? And then what it was saying was like, okay, so now if you're someone like Spirit and you have 200 planes, that's 10 to 20 billion dollars you have to have up front to now be able to buy that. So not only did you have to have the 15 billion to get the model certified, you got to have the 20 billion in just, capital up front to even be able to buy the asset or license the asset to even make the business works. And so that's why they were saying like in this industry, it's very hard. That's why you don't see many new players rising just because the capital and the regulation requirements. You're on mute, Rodney.
Will these be the investments of the future? Here's what I mean by that. At some point in American history, we discovered planes. At some point, we got good enough at that technology that there was companies that were really good at making planes, and then there were other people that were more focused on the business of selling tickets, the management, the customer support, everything else, the flight attendants, the whole culture, I guess. It's been a long time. It's been a long time since we've seen like a huge innovation in that. It's like we built it, and now when we build airports, they're pretty much, don't get me wrong, they're like, it's like building a new mall. It's nice. Fundamentally, it's pretty much the same thing. And so I wonder if the future, and these things are kind of difficult to imagine right now because of the factors that you mentioned, Brylan, where it requires so much capital, and there's so much red tape, there's so much regulation. And then also, even if you could get the money and you could innovate, it's like where do you put these new types of airports, and all these different things would have to be, it's this huge infrastructure project. However, I have a feeling that we're going to see 50 billion, $100 billion projects in the future. And I think one of the early signs of that is seeing how much money is going into AI.
Mhm.
These $10 billion investments, $20 billion investments, $50 billion, $100 billion investments into basically future infrastructure are massive. And the money seems to mostly come from the super giants that are in the $1 trillion market cap ranges. And it would not surprise me if at some point even SpaceX created some form of space flight that was maybe an alternative to commercial airplanes.
Mhm.
And even what Bezos is doing, and potentially some other players, I can see a I can see a very, very unexpected, much needed, and overdue overhaul of the airline industry. But I don't know if it's necessarily today, and I don't know if Spirit is big enough to create enough changes or wake up enough minds to the idea of the innovation needed. But I could see basically there's an overdue in infrastructure from my standpoint. There should be likely planes either that are hybrid, So electric and using oil or gas, but then also potentially using rocket fuel, just like how like a SpaceX rocket would use. So I can see some innovation there, but we'll see. I don't know how long that is. I'm hoping that we can get that going maybe before 10 years.
Yeah.
Kicking that off in the next five, kicking it off in 5 years, and getting it done in maybe 5 or 6 more after that.
It's a good point. I guess speaking of infrastructure and network, let's talk about Amazon because
But yeah,
I mean you bring up a good point, right? Amazon's been secretly investing tens of billions of dollars a year into infrastructure and into building this incredible logistics platform, and now they're opening it up. So Amazon today just announced or launched their supply chain services, Amazon Supply Chain Services, which is basically opening up their entire logistics network. They have 80,000 plus truck trailers, right? So these are trailers that you can haul goods in, which every good that we order online, every good that we see in the store is moved through a trailer. So that's they're building a moat there. 24,000 plus intermodal containers, 100 plus aircraft to any business that wants to use these resources. They also have access to their warehouse network, of course, as well. So you'll be able to store raw materials, goods, and the entire pipeline and last mile all through Amazon logistic networks. Some of the notable companies that have signed up for this already: Procter and Gamble, 3M, Lands End, and American Eagle have already signed up. Those are big, massive corporations that are already using Amazon supply chain services. Their executive that runs their logistic network kind of pitched it as AWS for supply chain, right? They're essentially, and this is the playbook that Amazon has consistently run, which is turning an internal capability into a platform for others to be able to use. It's the same thing they did to build $100+ billion cloud platform, and they're just basically running that same playbook again. What do y'all think about that?
I think these internet companies are going to get much larger than anybody ever anticipated. I
100.
think I think Amazon seems like it's just a website. It just seems like it's a website where you go buy something and you press the button and a package comes to you. But I think that just that alone has created massive changes that we're not even done seeing, as we can clearly see. This reminds me of just like this is them saying that the postal service is not good enough. Like this is like one of the clearest signs of them saying the postal service, like just let us do this. Just let us do this. We are at another level with this, likely coming from their own bottlenecks. And also maybe even likely coming from the fact that, from my understanding, the postal service is still losing money. So that could be risky for the business.
I think this is more of a direct attack at UPS and FedEx over the
Okay.
for the postal service directly, because the postal service is in the business mostly of mail. Like if I'm a business, I want to send you a letter. It's more efficient. Yes, you can do it with next day with FedEx, but it's more efficient and probably cheaper to just do it through the US postal service. Right? That's a different business. Now, Amazon certainly could go after that business. There's nothing stopping them from doing that. They could definitely do it. But I think that's different than the package delivery business, right? Where if you're an e-commerce company, right, and you want to ship your vitamins or whatever to your customers, you're probably not going to use the post office to do that. You're probably going to hit up FedEx, UPS, right, to do that, build a contract with to manage all your logistics behind that, right? Because today when they announced this, UPS and FedEx stock dropped by like almost 9 and 10%. I saw like a 9 and 10% drop today. I mean, it was pretty big. So I mean, it's a clear. I think it's a clear going after their business. Now that business in and of itself, I'm simplifying it by calling it packages, but there's different tiers within that business. Amazon is not going after all of that. There are higher end margin delivery businesses, like for example, hospitals that are delivering like organs. UPS is really big in this business. So is FedEx, right? If you want to get a heart from one country to another, that's a huge high margin business. Amazon, I don't think they're probably going to be in that business right now, at least, right? But again, going back to my first example, if you're an e-commerce company, right? If you Procter and Gamble, like those types of companies, Amazon is coming. So I think again, it could be an attack at USPS, but I think it's more so for if I was an executive at UPS and FedEx, I'll be concerned because they built this quick.
Yeah.
I mean, these are companies
Yeah.
that have been around for what 60 years.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Well, you could tell that nobody at USPS is concerned about anything. Like you walk into a UPA, y'all walk into one of those post offices, you can tell that literally nobody's concerned about anything.
They're old, it's old, dirty, no lights.
Yes. Yeah. It's
I think
just, it's sad. It's sad. It's sad.
yeah, what I would say is, because if I'm being honest, I wasn't super hip to this story, but just kind of was reading up on it. I mean, it really is um, super super impressive. I think two things that are very interesting is like Amazon does around 25 million packages globally per day that they're already kind of moving through this network, and magically having that show up at your door. For them now to open this up to any other business in the world or individual brand, et cetera, that wants to be able to sell something, I think says a lot about, one, their preparedness for that capacity. Two, operationally, right? Like, say for example, if that capacity just goes from 25 to, it doubles to 50 mil, right? Like today, I think they announced it a few months ago that they have like over 1 million robots, right? And we know that they're investing heavily in that space too. Like, what does that say about like how they believe robotics may end up impacting this whole operation, right? Because I'm sure they're not just looking to add this type of volume and become inefficient over time. Like, they're probably going to be looking to double down on that. So I think that's something I'll probably be paying attention to and think is interesting. And then the other thing too that I thought was interesting was their point around forecasting the demand. And I think, once again, like going back to this idea of like, you know, all you have to do is make it and we'll get it from point A to point B. I mean, they're saying we know who B is, right? Like, it's their version of targeting, that we see with ads with, on Facebook and Instagram, right? Like, and I think, yeah, they were saying that like, yeah, based off of, all the data they have from Amazon Prime, et cetera, they're able to know for this type of category of product or whatever, what distribution center it needs to be in across the country. So now you don't even need to worry about where or what market across the US you need to be like doubling down on, right? Like, so yeah, I think those two things are like very fascinating to me around like, yeah, where are they anticipating robotic gains, and how is that going to show up in like the capacity expansion and efficiency? And then, yeah, I'm really interested to see like, man, does that volume increase because they're helping these businesses close that sale faster?
Do you think there's a privacy concern here from a data standpoint? From the perspective of Amazon Logistics handling shipping data information for a company that it essentially competes with on this marketplace? Because think about that supply chain line between the logistics and, like you mentioned, Brylan, you touched on ads. They've been building a fortress around ads for a minute, right? And so now they gotten to the point where if you're a brand, you won't be able to afford to not use ads on Amazon. Like, you just literally won't be able to afford to. Like, your competitors will literally kill you out of business due to ads, unless you got something super proprietary, right? Like from a product standpoint. But going back to the data privacy question, do you I think there's a data concern there?
I, if I'm gonna be honest, I think, yeah, well,
So
actually, a follow up question. What do you mean by privacy here?
Meaning like Amazon taking the logistics information that they have for customers of that business and using that data to inform another business segment that they have. For example, it could be their ad unit business, it could be their private label business, right? It could be their team that decides the algorithm around listings, right? Like whatever other business they want, but essentially using that data from that logistic network to inform decisions in other segments of the business.
Nah, I
I mean,
honestly, man,
if they get the customer the package quicker, that's. I feel like if we get the customer the package quicker, that's what I want as a customer. Maybe there's like a concern from the business standpoint, like if their customer data is benefiting, I guess, Amazon in a way,
you
or the
remember the
or
Amazon Basics?
Yeah.
I love Amazon Basics.
Yeah, yeah. Because I remember they were saying that that was, I think, an example of what you were just describing, Dre, where like they basically were just taking the data and learning what people liked and then just turning it into like Amazon Basics.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. So I'm like, okay, I think, I mean, I don't know. I think Amazon's going to continue to vertically integrate. I think you're going to see them probably buying manufacturing facilities at some point. They're going to
Oh,
start
100%.
manufacturing products. They're going to start buying
They're
up
about
all
to
the,
know who all your manufacturers are.
yeah, they're just going to get all that information and just continue to vertically integrate. And so I think Amazon is clearly well positioned here to
These are
continue our
super
revenue.
companies. These are super companies. These are like these are not no like these kind of. I'm willing to bet that Apple. We've underestimated Apple. We've underestimated Netflix. We've underestimated Amazon. We have underestimated even because probably because they keep hitting these record breaking levels that we think, oh, there's no way they can go any further. At some point, there must be a decline. But Amazon has shown that it's just built in such a way where it's going to forever grow. Like it doesn't have.
It'd be
I
hard to
mean,
take
there
them out.
you.
It'd be hard.
I honestly don't see a way you can. I all I see is that you can join Amazon, you can partner with Amazon,
Yeah,
like
I think they're the most formidable company we've probably seen in a long time. I would say
I
probably
think
even
so.
more than Apple, probably, right?
I think so.
And speaking of, I mean, you mentioned like at the beginning, you kind of mentioned as a customer, I just want my package to get there faster. They also just announced today 1 hour delivery, I think in 200 or 300 U.S. cities.
Yeah.
So now they're expanding that network even more. So now imagine you a brand, you run an ad, customer sees it, they order and they get it in 1 hour, right? Like instead of having to wait 2 days, right? So again, that just goes to further show like the capabilities that Amazon have. And to your point, I mean, it's impossible to compete against them. Where do you
They're
even
going
start?
they're going to push they're going to push the boundaries of how fast pressing a button and you getting something. I honestly think that they would be if there would be anybody that discovers teleportation, it would be Amazon. It's just that because I've been on Amazon since 2011. I think that's the first 2000. Actually, no, 2009. I was young and I had some extra cash to spend. I was always on Amazon, and I remember it was blowing me. I remember it was just shocking how quickly you could get something as compared to everything else in my life. Everything else in my life was just slow, but Amazon was Prime, 2 day, and it was I couldn't believe it back then. But now you have this every few years, it's faster and faster. And it just begs the question, how much faster can you get? I mean, hours fast.
That's fast.
So, okay, 30 minutes. All right. Like, but where do we go from there? 30, okay, it can get you in 30 minutes, right? That gotta be next. But then after that, what else? After that, like how much faster how much faster can it
I
get?
guess I guess as fast as they can get the drone from the fulfillment center to your house. Whatever
As
whatever
fast
whatever
as
the speed limits are on that.
I'm surprised they haven't went and bought Zipline.
it's probably coming. They're
Maybe.
literally trying to get you something as fast as you possible, as fast as technologically possible.
Have they partnered with them yet? Do you know if they have a partnership?
I know Walmart does.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know.
Walmart has a huge one with
Zipline
them.
has Zipline is an interesting company, man. They have like a little moat that nobody kind of see in that space, in that drone delivery
Bro, you
space.
supercharged that with Amazon, bro.
Yeah.
Overnight, the sky, you going
Yeah.
It's
man.
crazy.
Yeah.
You're talking about a company that knows how to operate in the physical world.
Well, if Walmart were smart, then maybe they would do the acquisition. Right?
Shit, Walmart better catch up.
I think Walmart is well positioned, bro. I think everybody be
Mm.
sleeping on Walmart like they about to die, but I'm like, every Walmart I ever go into is nothing but
They ain't gonna
mayhem and
die.
pandemonium. Like, so clearly there's an audience for Walmart that you can't remove it, bro. Like it's just pandemonium at every single Walmart. And that's just the brand of Walmart. Like that's what they like. That's the customer they go after, and they just like it. And they got stores everywhere. So I mean, again, we started the conversation about talking about infrastructure that Amazon has been investing billions of dollars into a year to build to this point. I mean, so has Walmart. And so, maybe Walmart has been slower to kind of utilize that infrastructure in the best way. But I think over the past couple of years, they've changed that. Like they've launched some cool shit where they, again, I wouldn't necessarily use it, but like I think Walmart launched something where they'll deliver your groceries and put it in your refrigerator for you, which is
Yeah.
kind of crazy. So like you could be out of town on a business trip, come back, you got a whole fridge stocked with groceries already. So there's some stuff that I think they're doing that's interesting, but nevertheless, Amazon is making them dance, man. Amazon is making everybody dance.
These I'm telling you, the future is going to be even crazier than I think people imagine. I mean, there's going to be supersonic flights getting from London to New York in a few hours, getting from LA to New York in an hour. Like there's going to be new airlines. There's going to be space flight. There's going to be, I mean, Amazon is going to. I mean, it's just it's going to. I think it's hard to imagine because it's going to be so big. Another prediction that I'm just going to randomly call out before our next topic is I think Netflix is going to buy up movie theaters and or create their own movie theaters in person. And I think they may also use things like the Vision Pro or whatever or similar to revamp the movie experience. Uh, uh, 'Cause I think these internet companies, I think what they've done is they competed in the only arena they could, which was the internet. They couldn't you couldn't come out and compete with Walmart. It was never you weren't going to be able to come out and compete with Walmart as Amazon in the physical world. So they skirted around and they did it in the digital. Then the digital gave them so much capital and allowed them to innovate so much better that now they have cash that they can deploy in the real world on a high level that it's just like it's weird, it's strange, but we're gonna see some crazy stuff.
Hmm, for sure. All right, where we want to take it next? OpenAI or where we want to go?
Yeah,
OpenAI,
how do we, man, OpenAI, it's interesting right now because don't they have the court case going on?
they
They
do.
had the revenue story.
They do. They do. The headline today that I saw though was about the deployment company, but we can talk
I
about
saw
all.
that.
We could touch
Yeah,
on
yeah,
all
yeah,
of it.
yeah. Let's start there.
Okay. So what I saw today, I don't know if y'all saw the same thing I saw on Twitter, but they essentially formed a $10 billion joint venture with some private equity firms. And so they've raised some capital, I think around $4 billion, some TPG, Brookfield, and Bain for a new entity called the Deployment Company. Total valuation around $10 billion. OpenAI is putting in, I think, $1.5 billion of their own capital, according to Bloomberg. This is interesting. They're providing they're kind of have a guarantee of a return to these PE firms. So they're guaranteeing 17.5% annual return over 5 years for PE investors. And so these PE firms have agreed to make their portfolio companies essentially a customer base of OpenAI's enterprise tools. And so OpenAI will essentially embed engineers directly into these organizations, similar to how Palantir has kind of have the forward deploy engineer model where they'll send an engineer on site to a client to build whatever solution. OpenAI is kind of gonna be doing the same thing. What I think is interesting about this is that literally within minutes of that announcement, I saw another headline that Anthropic announced a very similar type model, much smaller, but they're partnering up with Blackstone, Goldman Sachs, and a couple other real estate firms to do the same thing, right? And so I think what this goes to show, and I think this is really interesting. I just purchased an agency as I mentioned before on the pod last year, and so I've been thinking a lot about what's the next model in the agency space to kind of go after, like this wide open, just tons of opportunity. And I think this deployment market is super fascinating to me. And I kind of saw this years ago with Salesforce, right? I had an opportunity at an organization that wanted to use Salesforce, but then we had Salesforce licenses, and then we had to go hire a consultation company to actually implement Salesforce throughout the organization because the software was so complex and there's so much flexibility in it that usually an organization doesn't have the internal resources to just roll that out, right? So then you got to go hire somebody to do the same thing. And I thought to myself, it's the same thing with these AI tools, right? If you want to take advantage of OpenAI's or Claude's enterprise tools, where do you start as an enterprise? If you don't have those internal resources, where do you go, right? And then you get to a point where you start buying a couple licenses, but then you're not seeing the ROI that you want. So then what do? You cancel it, right? Or then you restrict it to only a few teams. And so clearly the bottleneck, I think, at least in the short term, maybe this gets solved over way 10 years from now. Maybe the opportunity is limited. But I think right now the bottleneck really is on the deployment side. And so both Anthropic and OpenAI see the opportunity to solve that bottleneck. And they're doing that through distribution by partnering with these big PE firms, these big financial institutions, and kind of doing a top-down approach, right? So going in at the top and then kind of accelerating through the portfolio companies. And then again, once you get these enterprise tools installed, that switching cost becomes higher. So these are interesting distribution tactics. But I say that to say that I think even at the small level, like myself as an agency owner, I'm thinking about that too. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity and helping companies deploy agents, helping companies deploy these tools, helping companies get their data, get their security right to be able to adopt these platforms so that they can use them. Because I don't think these tools today are as plug and play as most people
Yeah,
like to
no,
think, especially
no.
when you get in these larger organizations that are just they're big, paper everywhere. Like it's pretty chaotic. And so I think that's multi-billion, $100 billion opportunity right there. Probably more. Probably as big as the market of selling AI. It could be $1 trillion.
That's low key a lot of jobs. That's a lot of jobs. Like not in a bad way. Like at least when I think about engineers, there might be more of a need for more engineers, just even based off of like it is a good point that a lot of these things are not plug and play. Sometimes I underestimate how many companies have the internal resources to be able to set up some of these workflows, especially when it comes to agents. Agents can be very, very tricky, and you need like these high level experts to come in and kind of make sure all that kind of goes a certain way or goes in a reliable way. Um, and this whole thing, the speed of this whole thing, it kind of just makes me think as they do this, as these programs through Anthropic and OpenAI get more deployment through these enterprises, they're inevitably going to come across problems. And what I'm excited about is the development and the iteration of that process. Because ultimately, the end goal will be nearly plug and play agents at some point. But right now, it's all these little, it's like putting together uh, a rocket from random pieces. But then over time, or like what I'm thinking of is it's the SpaceX rocket where when you look at the first SpaceX rocket, it just looks like they just threw it together. Like it looked like it just shouldn't have worked. And then each time it got a bit more refined, and then now it just feels like it looks like three pieces. I'm sure it's more, but it just looks like three simple pieces that they put together. And I'm looking forward to that process. I think agents are complicated. I went to go look at OpenClaw, and I saw Sam tweet about OpenClaw and being able to sign in with ChatGPT, and I think those people who are experimenting are also going to be able to bring stuff to enterprises. I have a friend that works at a large company, and he happened to get a budget from the company to just play around and experiment with OpenClaw because the fact that almost nobody knows how to use agents within the context of the company. And then like IT and then also security, they have their concerns too. So this whole thing it's an emerging. There's clearly going to be emerging opportunities. And I think it was $10 billion for OpenAI and then $1 billion for Anthropic.
Yep. Yep. And to size the market a little bit more, PE owns about $13 trillion in assets, right?
which is fucking nuts.
And there's thousands of portfolio companies. And so, again, that top down distribution channel is quite interesting. And so, there's this massive opportunity there.
That low key might be the great accelerator.
Could be.
Because there's so many and it's genius because like when that firm comes in there and says, hey, you need to do this, you got to do this.
Yeah.
100%.
So
yeah, it's top down. They're going to have instant access to whatever they need. They're going to have participation from management, right? Participation from the employee base, right? Which is genius, right? Because that's usually where you start to get you run into bottlenecks when you try to roll out changes across these enterprises,
Mm-hmm.
right? But once you get that buy-in, right, and it's top down, and you know the revenue is there, it's easy, right? So yeah, I think
I
that's
do, I
gonna be
do,
huge.
I do like one of the things that is interesting is that like, with this being a joint venture, the way the risk is like structured. So OpenAI is really the one taking on like all the risk. So in the best case scenario, the PE companies are getting paid that 17.5%, that you had mentioned, which is even interesting because once again, that where's that money coming from? It's essentially coming from their portfolio company. So the money's just being recycled, which is very interesting. But I think the thing that what I was just reading is they have revenue targets. And so if those revenue targets aren't met to be able to compensate for, that 17 and a half or whatever for all those, portcos or, for that firm, then OpenAI is on the hook for making that happen. There was a really good article that was written that was talking about like, so is that going to come from them having to raise like more funds because they're already operating at a loss? Like, is this going to come from, the revenue they're expecting from like their enterprise business? I think that's where it's going to be very interesting. It's like the thing that I don't think no one is talking about is like everybody is saying like, oh, there's an explosion in tokens. And that is true, but that doesn't necessarily mean there's an explosion in adoption. And the reason why there's an explosion in tokens is because the architecture has changed. And so now are you like the amount of tokens is not only increasing because of the output, but because these models are thinking. And then if we're saying they're going to implement agents, that's just going to be, whatever number of tokens. And so the thing that I'm very interested in is like, that's what I feel like has been the problem is tokens has been increasing, but adoption has not really been like super strong. Do you get adoption plus the tokens increasing? And then like what potential reality does that, create, for OpenAI? I think that could be interesting.
I mean, it's gonna open up tens of billions in revenue. We already know what it's gonna do. It's gonna be
Yeah.
crazy. The revenue is up and to the right on both of them, on both Anthropic
Well,
and on OpenAI.
the other thing that I'm interested in is like, and I don't know if you've read up on anything about this, but it's like, what are the data policy? Like going back to it, like what are the data policies between these companies when it comes to this joint venture? Because yes, the deployment is going to be immediately impactful in terms of revenue. But I think in terms of that innovation cycle and getting these traces, when it comes to completing a variety of tasks across a variety of different industries, because these portcos fall into them, like you could see the capabilities of these agents, especially, Kodak's been doing numbers recently, like within the next year just look different because they got access to data that was hard to get before. Right. And so I don't know if have you heard anything on like the data piece for this or?
I haven't, but that's something I've thought about. Yeah, and maybe there's a monetization opportunity there. I don't know what that looks like, but yeah, I haven't seen anything recently on that.
I want to speak quickly, and this just popped in my brain. So this is unscripted. I didn't think it, so. Hopefully, um, this lands correct. But basically, I was on Instagram, and I think I saw this. I think she's an author. Her name is, I think it's Mel Robbins, and I think I'm pretty sure she's came up with a book called Let Them, like the Let Them theory, basically. And to sum it up real quick, is essentially if people do stuff, just let them do it. Stop getting overly stressed about whatever that people do. Just let them do it. Basically, it's I don't give a fuck type of attitude, right? Anyways, I see her make a post and on Instagram, and the post is telling women to put in their financial data, and she gave a prompt, and the prompt was basically just telling the AI to process the financial stuff. I'm thinking it's like bank statements and stuff like that, and to give advice, step by step, simple advice on how to improve their situation. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because we're just talking about AI and the scale of it, and I just started thinking about just this person and how people kind of react to all this stuff. But there was somebody else who replied, and she was like, "No, don't do that. Don't give ChatGPT your financial information. don't give it any of this stuff, don't give it that, don't give it this. And there was a whole gender component to it too. I guess both of the women had different perspectives. Mel looked at it like, you know, based on the whatever number she's reading, there's more men that are embracing AI and using AI more than women. So she wanted to be someone who was trying to get women more interested in it and how it can help their lives, etc. And then the other woman was like, no, like I think it's good that maybe women are not doing this because AI is using your data. It's also something that is aligned with um, male ideologies and all these other things. And this is a doctor. She has almost 1 million followers on Instagram, a lot of influence in all these different places. I just wanted to bring that up to you guys because I'm thinking about, okay, does that person have a point on the data piece? And then likewise, do companies have a point on the data piece as well, like as far as their data? And then also, I guess the second thing that I'm thinking about is that will the adoption of AI create these huge gaps? Because if what Mel is saying is true, that women are not using AI as much, and then we see this huge infrastructure, and I'm not saying it's a problem. I'm just saying, will these things happen or will they not? Or will the force of AI just spread through and it doesn't matter who you are? I don't know. I know I'm asking a few different things, but there's the data piece, and then there is, will there be a gap, whether it's gender, race, or age, or whatever? And then just even the potential resistance and how people view some of this stuff. Because I viewed it as somebody's trying to encourage a group of people who they think are not using AI a lot, and then you have somebody else with tons of influence. I mean, like not like some random person, some high level person saying, "Don't give them your data, don't use it." It's coded in male language. That's not good for women. Don't add your finances to it. Don't give OpenAI this information. Just interesting, right?
You remember that meme where the dude drew the graph and was like, fuck around and find out? That's what's going to end up happening here. Like, yeah, I could probably speak a little bit more to like the gap piece. Cause I was having a conversation about this over the weekend.
Mm-hmm.
I think the first gap that is showing is going to be across class, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think, the fact that like these companies are going after, white collar work, enterprises, things of that nature, like you're going to see folks in just a different class bracket probably be
Mm-hmm.
like heavily adopters of it and probably be more engaged with it, right? Because it's naturally just embedded into our digital workflows where like, there's a lot of people that have heard of Chat GPT, but maybe only use it like once a week or something, or maybe
Yeah.
kind of
Once a
like
month.
using it just to look. Yeah. I think things do start to get very interesting. And maybe this is when shit is probably going to start to matter. But if you think about it, a few weeks ago, we were talking about like Waymo, right? And the scale that they've, been able to, hit literally in the last few years is freaking absurd, right? And then obviously you have Tesla or whatever. If we think about what they're coming after that logistical, we move people or we move things. And who are the groups of people that mostly do that?
Yeah. Yeah.
It is minorities, right? And so I think you're going to see it in waves. I think first you're going to see it happen at the class level. Once it starts impacting a lot of minorities fall into like that lower class, then I think you're going to see the gaps even deepen across like probably like racial lines or things of that nature as well. But I think at first it's going to be class.
Yeah. Yeah. That's always an interesting line there. It's because there are things that seem more race based that are more class based, if that makes sense. So there are things that seem like, oh, we're target, or there are things that seem more gender based, but they're not. They're class based and or just interest based. So for
Yeah,
example,
yeah, yeah.
that woman is telling people to go on AI and she's giving them a use case, and somebody else is telling them, who's a woman as well, saying, hey, don't use it, don't trust them, it's there's misogyny in it and this and that, etc. And this person has tons of influence. And then you start to think that, well, okay, well, we already saw kind of a bit of crypto where most people who made wealth off crypto were not women, and we already would expect some of that because maybe that's not the primary interest of a lot of women. If you were to tell, there are just typically, from what I see, more male nerds out there who are into that type of stuff, who would discover that type of stuff. But I'm not saying it's a problem or anything like that. I'm just pointing out how the distribution of this stuff does not seem as equal, but it's not because it's not accessible. I see narratives controlling people. And even actually, Dre and I have a friend that we grew up with where he was not going to, like, I told him about AI maybe when it first came out, I told him about ChatGPT, and he wasn't using it because of a narrative about it using too much water. And you just think about like the fact that something can be there and everybody can use it. It's accessible and there's no like anybody can use it. But depending on the narrative that you're exposed to, can seemingly set people back 2, 3, 4, 5 years on something that is going to change everything around them. I mean, I just find that strange to see play out in real life. We don't gotta dive too deep into it because I know we were on our last bit, but just seeing that happen in real time, I think is interesting to see because I feel like we are embracing AI at a level that is at a high pace and competitive pace, and we're growing with the industry,
I'll
and
be
that's
honest.
carrying over into other parts of our life.
So I had 2 convos this week, man, where it actually put me in a headspace where it was like, man, I may not be embracing this the way I thought I was embracing
You
it.
think so?
100%, bro. Like it was two of my friends in New York, but they were talking about like their companies and specifically like their cloud budgets right now. One was spending $500,000 a month
A
on
month?
cloud. Yes, the other's company was spending $2.5 million a month on cloud. And it was actually very fascinating because once again, like I think most of my relationship with like cloud code, things of that nature is like personal projects, side quests, things of that nature, not necessarily within like a company. But even how they talked about like how they've built their own harness systems and like incorporated knowledge graphs and things of that nature. And like one was like, yeah, like on average, the company probably has 1,000 agents like going at any one time. I was like, yeah, bro, I don't know if I'm really using this the way I thought I was really using this, bro. But I do think it comes back to is like, are we chasing the spin and the number of agents one can spin up as like the goal, or are we really chasing, actual outcome? Yeah, because I won't say the company, but the guy, one of the friends said, he was like, yeah, we got 4 months of runway left.
And he's spending that much?
I'm like, bro, you spending, and they raised like, I think they ended up raising like 8 or something last year for a pre-seed or something. And I'm like, in a year, you got 4 months of runway left and y'all been spending $500,000.
They need to raise immediately.
I was wrong. I thought you were talking about like a business spinning that is a real business. You're talking about a startup.
Right.
They're just they're not even burning their own money. They're burning somebody else's money.
They're just wasting money.
Just based on that, they're not even the calculus is wrong. Because if it was coming off of if it was their brand, if they were generating, they wouldn't be spending it like that.
They're literally just handing the money to Anthropic.
But I do agree with you. Which is maybe this is a separate conversation we should have, right? Because there has been this thing about, what is it, token maxing, right? I'm sure I've heard that term before, right? So Brylan, you asked the question of, are we chasing spend? I think, yeah. I think right now in the short term, yes. And I think there's probably, I mean, I don't have, I mean, I do have investors, but I mean, I don't have like capital raise conversations with them. I would imagine though, if you are a company raising capital today, you are probably being pushed to spend more money on AI and AI related spend, just as years ago, you were being pushed to spend that money on growth and marketing, right? And so I do think there is probably, I would imagine that's what's happening. But again, we've seen that term token maxing. So we know it's happening at least at the big institutional level. This is happening at the corporate level as well. But I would assume it's happening at the startup level. So I'm not surprised to see that. I feel bad for those founders. They're spending all that money and not getting no results. I mean, That's the way the game is, right? You just burn money on fire. That's just early stage startup game, man.
And they probably think they're getting results. Like
Bro.
4 months is crazy. 4 months is crazy. You gotta,
Claude couldn't tell them that shit. They didn't ask Claude, like, hey,
they should ask
examine the
Cloud.
balance sheet, examine the bank account, and tell us, should we continue this shit? I'm sure Claude would have said no, stop immediately.
Yeah. Sometimes I wish that we were given a few $1 million right now with the AI models that you have right now. I don't see, how do you run out of money when you have AI? How do you run out of money? I guess I don't see it.
When
I
you
agree with people.
they probably don't have no vision on what they want to do. They just switching. Honestly, I'd be scared to raise money now if I was a founder, if I'm gonna be honest with you, especially a software founder.
I think so.
Because what do you build?
Competitive.
I mean, what can you actually build that's actually useful? I heard Shamoff say this, like useful and valuable. Meaning, like, what would you build that is actually useful and actually generates a sustainable value? I think that has become a lot harder to answer. So if I raise capital today from investors, I would be scared of shit too. I wouldn't know what I would do. I'd probably be spending money recklessly on tokens as well, trying to figure out what to do. Because it's like, honestly, what you gonna build? You're gonna go in with your next calendar app, right? You're gonna go in with your souped up CRM system. Like, I mean, really, what are you gonna build that's actually, again, useful and valuable?
So some of the best founders are probably going to focus on the real life businesses because, as you mentioned, there's just going to be tons of failures left and right in the software world. It's just, there's no real way. It's outside of gathering a network of individuals, but there's no way that you can use software as your competitive advantage. Like having great engineers and stuff like that are not necessarily like going to, it's just everybody, all software is under a lot more scrutiny from investors. All software, even if the software was not able to be made by AI, everybody would assume that it would be. So that would even make it hard for you as well. Like you would be hard pressed to get somebody to believe, oh, AI can't make what I'm making. Nobody would believe that. Yeah. All right, guys. Well, look. Oh, this is a long one. This is like it's not that bad. An hour and 20 minutes.
I think we were efficient though. I think this is gonna end up being a good episode. We were efficient in the topics. Talked about a lot of good stuff too, which I think this is a good precursor to some of the other stuff that we'll go into in some of the future episodes.
Yeah, we got to tap into a few things. We definitely got to tap into a few things, and I definitely want to speak more on this gap. The gap is widening in real time. Like I think before, when people had dial-up, you weren't like zooming past everybody. The dial-up wasn't taking you to like 0 to 100. You may have from like 0 to like 5, and then 5 years later you went from 0 to 10, and then 2 years later you went from 10 to 15, 20. But AI takes somebody from like being dumb to they can sound smart. That's not like that. That's a big step. And I think the kids know it though. So I will say the kids know it. The kids know it, I believe, and the corporate guys and women know it. But there's a whole class of people that don't. That they just, and also they don't necessarily need it in their job on a day-to-day. So they're not going to be as fluent. So
we shall see. All right, guys, let's wrap it up.
Oh yeah.
1